Good afternoon. This is Beth Ty from MPA, and I'm pleased to welcome everybody to today's webinar series, launching our webinar series, stemming from the MPA's Imagination Awards. The Imagination Awards are from our, I think I just paused something, excuse me. The Imagination Awards are sponsored by our IMAG community, and our speakers today are members from the IMAG community. So please join me in welcoming today's presenters. First, Krista Gibbons, who will be speaking about Chasing Genius from National Geographic. Brad McKee and Maggie Zakowitz, who are from Landscape Architecture and will be speaking about Your Land, and Jeff Levy, who's from HBR, who will be talking about Harvard Business Review, better known as Harvard Business Review, who will be speaking about subscriber acquisition at Harvard Business Review. Before we get started, just a little bit of background about the Imagination Awards. They were launched in May of 2016 to celebrate the work of independent magazine media companies and brands. What's different about the Imagination Awards, and one of the reasons they're so interesting and have allowed us to create this robust webinar series, is that these awards recognize work being done across departments. So we look at teams and projects that capture the essence of a brand, demonstrate growth and innovative thinking, imaginative tactics, but are firmly grounded in well-defined business objectives. Obviously, as we all know, without successful execution and measurable results, our efforts would not be as important. So the programs you'll hear about today hit on all fronts. The award categories for the Imagination Awards are general revenue, audience development, leadership, content/editorial, events, advertising and native revenue, and digital. So as you can see, the work that's going to be showcased over the next 4 weeks will really give you a broad spectrum of what's going on at smartest independent magazine media companies today. For more information on the Imagination Awards and a list of all of our finalists and winners, we invite you to log on to magazine.org, MPA's website, where you'll find 2 brochures, one from 2017 and one from 2018, which give a list of all of the finalists in the above-mentioned categories. And what we found is that it's a great fodder for your own team to think about new initiatives and ways that you can propel your brand forward. Before we get going, a couple of housekeeping details. All of our webinar attendees are on mute during this entire webinar. We've found that this leads to a higher quality of experience for both the presenters and for attendees. That said, we encourage you to ask questions. Our presenters are super skilled and very knowledgeable in their areas, and we'd like you to take advantage of their expertise. Please use the sidebar on your screen to ask questions. Each of the presenters will have time for questions at the end of their individual segment, and then we're going to be taking questions for all of our presenters together and in general at the very end of the webinar. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Krista Gibbons, and she's from Nat Geo, as we said, and Krista's going to be talking about one of Nat Geo's signature programs, Chasing Genius. Krista, thank you for joining us today, and I'm happy to hand over the microphone to you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think this is just a great way to share best practices, and we're really delighted to be able to present something we're really proud of and what we've accomplished last year with Chasing Genius. I wanted to kick off just by giving a little bit of insight into sort of how this came about. We were batting around ideas, as we all do, about what we could take to market and looking for new ways to engage our brand partners, and really wanted to figure out how we can develop a new initiative that would both tap into our social media leadership as the brand with the most sort of social media followers, and a very active community on social, and also really something that was really squarely in Nat Geo's wheelhouse, in a purpose-driven sort of social impact platform. And so that was what was driving it, was that new way to engage with our partners, but also tapping into our strengths. And so what we also thought about when we were developing this platform was some of the consumer insights in the world today, which is, consumers today believe that they do have the power to change the world. This is especially true of millennials, but with every generation that comes into the ecosystem of engagement, it is more and more true, and we believe they're right. And so thinking about that notion of changing the world, National Geographic as a brand and social media were some of the key things, as well as how can we take what has historically been, especially with a legacy publication like National Geographic, and go from a monologue to a dialogue. And social is really a perfect environment to do that, and evolve how we communicate with our constituents and our consumers. The other insight was that people really want to believe that they belong, and so creating a sense of community. So those were all the thoughts that went into creating this platform. And the platform itself is a global initiative that's built on the premise that those transformational ideas can come from anywhere and from anyone. And really thinking about that as like the democratization of innovation or impact innovation. You don't have to be a scientist at MIT to solve the world's problems, or the top researcher at a major corporation. It can come from anyone, a teacher, anyone working on any idea, a grad student, really, and bringing everyone into a problem-solving mindset through this community. And through that, we wanted to both inspire them with our storytelling capabilities. We wanted to engage them, as I said, going from monologue to dialogue, and really ignite change, give them action, something that they can do, something that they can join, something that they can take part of on a number of different levels. When we thought about the platform, this was a schematic that we designed to sort of talk through how we envisioned it working. There was really two sides of the equation. There was the content side, and there was both editorial content that we developed around Chasing Genius, telling stories about people who are changing the world, whether it's this woman, Kathy Koo, who was in Uganda, saw that these communities didn't have clean drinking water. She was an engineer, and so she developed this low-cost water filtration system. So we told that story. But we also told brand stories with our brand partners about ways that we could connect them into impact stories. All together, the editorial and the brand custom content designed to inspire people to get into that mindset of anyone can change the world. And then through that, we invited people to join the community, which is the other side of the equation, really promoting this through our social media footprint, but across our ecosystem to say, be part of Chasing Genius, sign up, be a member. And that's where we more deeply were able to connect and engage with people on the Chasing Genius challenge itself, which is, I'll go into a little bit more detail. So it's really sort of a system, if you will, where the content inspires, then we engage people through the challenge, and as time goes on, the results of those challenges then become inspirational content itself, and the cycle goes on. This is Chasing Genius at a glance. I wanted to share this slide because there was so many different parts of the company that were involved in getting something like this off the ground. I think at one point I counted that I worked with 80 different people across the company, from brand marketing to our social media group to our broadcast. We had talent involved with a Chasing Genius Council, who were actually the judges that deliberated and chose the winning ideas. We worked with our digital partners, comms and PR, as well as an external agency that we hired to sort of help us develop the design and the look and feel, and execute with our tech developer. We also had to work across both National Geographic and Fox security. So it was a pretty big undertaking across the company, which I know many of you can probably relate to a big undertaking like that. A little bit about the process. As I said, the inspirational storytelling was a big part of it, but the challenge itself was the other side of the equation, which had, not as big of a volume, if you will, of impressions, but more of that one-to-one engagement. So we announced a challenge and specifically said, here's the problem we're looking to solve, and invited people to share a 60-second video of what is their idea for how they would tackle that challenge. Those videos were then posted on the Chasing Genius site, where the community could comment. There was a lot of conversation. This is a great idea. Have you ever thought about this? I'd love to work with you. Can we be in touch? So there was a lot of really interesting networking and sort of collaboration that happened just from people posting their videos. After 6 weeks of submissions, we had that Chasing Genius Council of Experts that did deliberate and determine the finalists that we put forth back to the public, back to that large social media following, to say, which idea do you think should win? And then we awarded that winning idea a $25,000 prize. So that's the process from soup to nuts. The challenge is about an 8-week cycle. And then the storytelling can live as sort of an on-ramp into the challenge, as well as an exit ramp out of the challenge, depending on what our partners interested in terms of a campaign timeline. These are just some visuals of sort of the site itself that we built. We tried to have a dynamic digital environment where we parked all of that inspirational storytelling in the Chasing Genius site. It was a microsite within the Nat Geo ecosystem, dedicated URL of natgeochasinggenius.com. We had about the challenge. There was a detailed page about the Genius Council. Then we had a page for our partner where we brought in some of their content that related back to the concept of Chasing Genius and social impact. So a lot of opportunities for not just partner sponsor logo, but really nice deep integration for our partners with the challenge, aligning the challenge to their brand platforms and their messages, but also giving them a place to share more about the work that they're doing. So these are just some of those screen grabs, where you can see what we did with Sprint. Our challenge was unlimited innovation. How do you tap into the network of the future in 5G? If there were no boundaries to the speed of data or the number of people that had access to the internet, what would be possible was the challenge. So you can see how that aligns with Sprint. And then a lot of their content was to show people what is possible and what is being done on the network today to inspire them. So when we think about how we brought the consumer into that ecosystem, we're currently at about 37,000 members of our Chasing Genius community. But when we think about the funnel and all the different marketing activations that we embarked upon to get to that level of community, we certainly pulled on all of our levels, from social, broadcast, print, digital, and then we did a lot of one-to-one outreach with nonprofit institutions, academic institutions, influencers that we knew would be proud to just promote it on our behalf, not as a paid influencer. And so what we found after the fact when we surveyed our community was that, initially we thought a majority of our participation would come from social, because our social is such a huge footprint. But email was a very significant driver of community acquisition, because email is really where our nearest and dearest members, they feel like they're a stronger affiliation with Nat Geo. So we got about a quarter of our community from social, a quarter from email, a quarter from digital, and then the rest was a mix of sort of broadcast, referral, direct outreach, my friends doing it, I signed on to support my friends, and things like that. But it was a nice, healthy mix. And so it proved that it's important for us to sort of really activate across our entire ecosystem. And then these are the results. All told, I think that sort of impressions, when you think about platform impressions, that's something that we can dial up and down as the media company. But what I'm most proud of is really that we were able to not only deliver on those impressions for the community and really engage people, but also for our partners, But earned media, I think, is a really important indicator because there's so much noise out there, but this platform really broke through. And with just 2 challenge executions so far under our belts, we've gotten through 390 earned media stories. And many of those did mention our partners because of that deep integration. The other thing that I think is really interesting here is the social engagements number. That's really high because people were, it felt natural to our ecosystem, and our consumers were hungry for that kind of purpose and social impact. So that's a very strong number and an indicator of this resonating. And then, as I said, the community itself, 37,000. Our initial goal was 5. We then recalibrated our goal to 10,000. And I think at the first challenge, we were over 25,000. And after the second 1,000, we've moved up to 37. I think if we did it again, we would probably blow past 50. So to date, we've gotten almost 4,000 ideas, which when you think about the impact of something like this, it's not just the winning idea. It's also all of those ideas that were submitted because people were brave enough to put their ideas into a video. But then it's also just changing people's mindset to say, even if I didn't submit or participate, viewing this content, reading about this, I'm inspired to think about that and have a different mindset as a human. And so we think about the impact broader than that. These were just some quotes. I'm not going to read them all to you, but we did get incredible feedback on our social, just sort of like, people were really excited about this as an initiative from Nat Geo, and it really broke through, as I said. And, the industry also, we did we're able to get the recognition of a number of different awards entities, which we're really proud of. So with that, I will close, and hopefully I was on time. I think we now have, I don't know, do we do questions?
Yes, if anybody has any questions, please use the question box to the right of your screen, and Krista can take questions specifically about Chasing Genius, Nat Geo. That's a big, important program. What was your ramp-up time, Krista, from original concept to getting it in the field?
That's a great question. I think from an original concept, there was a lot of sort of internal organizing to take it to market. But once we had a brand partner, it took us about 5 months to really dig into the details of how are we going to construct this, who's going to build it, who's the right agency. And that was a 5-month ramp up to get the initial launch with our GlaxoSmithKline partner. The second time we did it with Sprint, it was about 12 weeks. And if we're fortunate to bring on a third partner, which we're hoping to do soon, we've been able to compress that on-ramp to 8 weeks. So with every iteration, it's becoming a shorter and shorter on-ramp. But the first one's the toughest.
Got it.
There's another question here on my chat to me. Did you find this program brought in a different person or profile to the Nat Geo file? I think that it was successful in bringing in a younger demographic just because of the impact behind it and the way that it's sort of squarely rooted in purpose. We were able to both activate our audience and bring new people in. And I think a lot of that sort of partner outreach and those academic and for the community itself, certainly that was the case, that we were able to bring new people in.
Great. Krista, you have another question. Specifically, did you use outside agencies for media and your creative, or did you handle all of that in-house?
So for the media, we did all of the media was in-house. We certainly, with our partners, GSK and Sprint, who are our 2 partners in these 2 challenges that we've done to date, we worked with their media agencies to figure out the media plan associated with it. We also did a lot of in-house promotion, which we planned internally. There was not an external media buy associated with this. This was all activation of our own consumers and through all of our different platforms. On the creative side, we did bring in an agency, Artemis Ward, who's based here in DC, helped us design the user journey, the creative, and the look and feel for this. And then we worked through them to find the right web developer to bring it to life through that microsite.
Great. good work, and thanks for getting us off to such a successful and robust start. We're going to turn the microphone now over to Brad McKee and Maggie Zakowitz of Landscape Architecture, who are going to be talking about their audience development program, Your Land. Brad and Maggie, welcome. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's nice to be here. Let me see. Let me get my screen oriented quickly. Can you see everything you need to see? Here we go. Okay, you should see the first page of my presentation. All right. Thanks, Krista. That was fabulous. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here. I'm Brad McKee. I'm the editor of Landscape Architecture magazine in Washington, D.C. I'm joined by our managing editor, Maggie Zakowitz.
Hello.
And it's nice to come after Nat Geo because in survey after survey after survey, our readers confirm that Nat Geo is the magazine they read most, other than us. And HBR is always in the top several. So it's good company. I wish I could say the opposite were true because then we would have a ton more readers, but it's not. Anyway, so to begin, this is us. This is a few of our recent issues. We cover the gamut from actual projects to pure imagination, to the grimmer realities of development. There on the right in our latest cover. We are 6 people. That's Maggie on the left, Chris McGee, our art director, Kat Katzma, our staff writer editor, who has moved on in the past month. That's me in the middle. Lisa Schultz is our copy chief, and Jennifer Root is our senior editor. Okay, so the magazine is quite old. It was founded in 1910 as a quarterly by a group of landscape architects who are now pretty legendary. The first article in the first issue was written by Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., whose father, Frederick Law Olmsted, you may be familiar with. He designed Central Park and Prospect Park, among other things. This is us through the years. The profession has grown pretty steadily through the decades from just a handful. It's a fairly new profession compared to architecture or engineering. It's grown from just a handful in 1899 when the society was founded, the American Society of Landscape Architects, that is, which is our publisher. Employment now in landscape architecture stands at about 22,500 nationwide, which is small compared to architecture, planning, and engineering, which we refer to as the allied design professions. In recent years, though, since the Great Recession hit especially, we've had a number of recruitment challenges into the profession, just as landscape architects have been expanding their roles in public spaces of all scales, and not least climate change adaptation. The enrollments in college degree programs for landscape architecture are stagnant or shrinking at many schools, and there are a lot of reasons for that. A lack of diversity remains a huge handicap. The profession is pretty overwhelmingly white and male, although women now make up 50% of landscape architecture graduates in degree programs and about 35% of working professionals. The number of people of color is disappointingly much smaller, so we are trying to fix that actively. We wanted to create a career discovery tool to find new recruits where they live, so we developed an issue for younger readers, and we titled it Your Land. It wasn't my idea originally. One of our members at the leadership level, a lot of our members had been talking about outreach to kids, outreach to people unfamiliar with the profession, because landscape architecture is so much less well known than the allied professions, architecture, engineering, and so forth. I was at a board meeting in 2016, our board of trustees meeting, and at lunch, one trustee leaned across the table after a morning spent talking about all this and said, you know, you guys should do a magazine for kids. And I thought, well, there's an idea hiding in plain sight that I hadn't even thought of. So I mentioned the idea to my boss, Nancy Somerville, who is the CEO of ASLA, and she was instantly a fan of the idea. And this was in about April or May, so we were able to get it in the budget for 2017 in mid-2016. It's meant to be a one-time publication for now. It was written and created to have a long shelf life on purpose. And as I wrote it, it was geared mainly to readers ages 10 to about 14 or 15, though we figured that younger readers could read up and older readers could read down. And in fact, that is what has happened. We've got kids way younger than 10, as young as 5 reading it, and a lot of people in adulthood have picked up the magazine and enjoyed it very much. It was basically written, I call it home cooking. I mean, it was basically made because Maggie warned me that the deadline was approaching and we didn't have anything in our pockets. And so I locked myself in a room for a few weeks and I hammered out the format and the content. Initially, I thought I was going to consult a lot of different people, practitioners, maybe some education specialists, but there wasn't time. And as I discovered, there wasn't a need. We had a deadline to get this out in April of 2017 on the occasion of World Landscape Architecture Month. And I figured, basically if it's fun and straightforward and pretty basic, it's going to hit the spot. So to get the look right, I turned to our favorite design office, Design Army, which is based here in Washington, D.C. Design Army completely redesigned our magazine in 2010. This is what they delivered. I went over and I met with Jake Lefebvre and Poom Lefebvre, the principals of Design Army, and I gave them all the material, and there was a ton of interaction back and forth on email, a few meetings at their office, and what came back was a total shock. I didn't want it to look cute. I didn't want it to look sweet or saccharine in any way. I wanted to communicate, like the magazine does every month, the adventure of being a landscape architect, because I like to say we are not a design magazine, we are an adventure magazine about design. I'll also note that I looked at other examples of material for kids that various publications put out, and I was convinced that I did not want to say the word kid anywhere in this thing. So I think that was a smart decision, because it has, of course, trickled up to adult readers. Those are some alternative covers we looked at on the right. I told them that I wanted it to be very much in the family with Lamb, yet nothing like the mothership. The project designer, Sucha Becky, sent me a note with the first comps that said, based on the main Lamb, but it's going to be much freer and crazier and more fun, more of a youth spirit. And she also noted that they hope to use the fluorescent green for the main color, which is PMS 802, which you see here on your screen. The rest was a really, and I'm sorry, I have a real lack of visuals on this, but I'm showing you what I got. The rest was a super exciting, fast, and pretty bracing process. The upgrade in color cost us an extra $5,000. So that took it up from about neighborhood of 7 to about 12,000. And that included the postage to get it out to readers. We sent 13,000 print copies to our print subscribers. That went with it with the regular magazine in the April issue. So to sand it down and give it the right finish, we went through a ton of iterations, really super fast, and we tried not to mess too much with the really loose and free spirit of the whole thing. Then we got our first copies about midway through March 17, and I was super nervous because everybody in our readership seems to have a strong opinion in many different directions about everything we do. But our distribution plan was this. We were going to publicize it widely. We were going to put it online. We did invite members and others to order copies in bulk for free. Postage only is all we charged, with two provisions. We needed them to describe to us how they planned to use the supplement and to report back later how whatever they were planning worked out. Before the year was out, the entire first run had been distributed. We printed 10,000 more at the beginning of 2018. And let me tell you something that shocks me to this day. We only got huge praise for this thing. Not a single complaint, not a single second guess came our way. Which still just blows my mind because unanimity is so rare in this field, which makes it so interesting. I will say, as a side note, this is all the fulfillment has been handled by the person in the role of career discovery and diversity manager. That person recently left the office to take another position, and we have a new hire coming in soon. So I don't have the data for exactly what happened. I have the original data for the distribution requests. In terms of audience development, this is a pretty long lead item. Even scraping, dozens more people into this fairly niche field would be a huge win for us. But I expect to have more data on that in the coming months. But I will say this just charmed my heart. One of our members, Ujiji Davis, posted a picture recently on Twitter of her nephew, who is 8 years old, reading the supplement. So that is my presentation, and I am ready for any questions. Let's see, question tab. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah.
Oh, this process took, really, it was like I'm asked the question, how long did it take? And it took, the idea sort of baked in my head for months, because it was when we budgeted it, and then I did exactly nothing for about 5 months, and then Maggie lit the fire. And I would say the whole thing took about 2.5 months from when I first started typing out the first pages or storyboarding to when we got the copies and dropped them in the mail. And I have another question. How often do you plan on publishing Your Land? As long as it seems to retain its shelf life, we're going to keep putting it out. I think we may do some updates over time to add some new projects, or also the education department here at the American Society of Landscape Architects recently supplemented this publication with 2 activity books, one for little kids under like age 8 to 9, and then one more for tweens and teens that allow them to sort of pick up the pieces of landscape architecture on paper anyway, or pick up a pen and do some experimentation, design a park, design a garden, design a wetland, design a habitat. So that is going to sort of extend the efforts of Your Land, but we'll keep this publication in circulation. We'll probably do another print run when this one runs out.
But you guys can download it. There's a free download on our website.
Yeah. Thank you, Maggie. We're at www.landscapearchitecturemagazine.org, and there is a tab on the right rail that you can go directly to download this. It is free. We hope as many people will take it up as possible. And I have a question: how much is it to subscribe? Our subscription price is $55 per year in the United States. Okay, I have another. I have a question about what sorts of relationships this has allowed us to create with our distribution partners. To be honest, it's really bolstered our relationships with our local and regional chapters and with college and university programs in landscape architecture. Those have been our main stakeholders in this. The enrollments are dropping in universities because of the cost of education, because of a lack of awareness about landscape architecture. And I'll tell you, on the horizon, they're probably being softened by the uncertainty around HB2 visas. I think it's HB2, it may be HB1, don't quote me on that. But the educational visas for degree programs. It has really strengthened our relationships with academic programs and with local chapters. And I think that's all the questions I have. If I could hand the microphone over to Jeff.
Right. Did you, I think there was one other question about the fulfillment process for people requesting the publication.
Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. The fulfillment process, we did not. Everything was done in-house. We're asked whether we used outside agencies for media or creative, or if it was all done in-house. Now, we did do the design out of the house because our art director would have been completely oversubscribed, designing a monthly and designing the supplement. So we went to the original designers of our redesign in 2011, Design Army, which we remain very close to because they gave us a really nice, simple kit to work with for the original magazine design, which holds strong to this day. And I knew they would give me something that would scare me a little bit, which I really like about them. And I could not be more pleased with the results. Fulfillment happens here in-house. We get orders on that spreadsheet through our education department. They go to the career discovery manager, and then that person sends them downstairs to our membership department, which then orders the copies, however many cartons they want. I think there are 100 in a case, in a box. They could get 50, they could get 100, they could get 25. And again, the only difference is the price of postage, and we do ask them to please report back to us. So those results are going to be a little longer in coming just because of some of the, for me, because I don't think anybody's been able to actually sit down and analyze them. We are very small here, so often the scale of our operation can be a handicap, but I think we were able to leverage our relatively modest scale into a big win for our membership with this publication.
Well, Brad and Maggie, this is Beth again, and I'd like to thank you. You guys are clearly punching well above your weight with this. It's a quintessential IMAG example of big ideas and beautiful, beautiful execution coming out of a team. So thank you for sharing your project with us, and we are going to come back to you and ask for results because there's not a brand that we work with here at MPA who is not very interested in the future of their brand, and that is, engaging a younger audience. So this is a perfect example of doing that within our audience development program. So I'm going to turn from Brad and Maggie of Landscape Architecture to Jeff Levy of Harvard Business Review. Jeff has led a team and I think has really, kind of been the poster child for innovation in subscriber acquisition and audience development for the past couple of years. And I'd like to welcome Jeff and thank him for joining us today. Jeff, I'm going to turn the microphone over to you, and thanks for being here, and congratulations on your Imagination Award nomination.
Great. Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. What I'm going to do is give you an overview of our social media program and some context around that, and dig in some numbers and how we view the results and how we're thinking about this. And then at the end, I thought it'd be really interesting to talk about one of our experiments that we're currently running. We're getting some great success from at the very end. So, I'll start by saying that our fiscal year runs from July through June, and last fiscal year, we completed a fundamental shift in how we think about subscription marketing, and we moved to a digital-first model. So this was not an incremental change by any matter. We shifted the culture of the organization and then our strategy and tactics around moving from what was pretty much 95% of our marketing done by direct mail to 100% all done in digital. And social media, particularly paid social, was a really, really big piece of that. And in a very short period of time, we ramped that up. So I'll give you some insight to that. Our goals for social media are really two. One is to acquire new subscribers, not surprisingly, and also engage our current subscribers so that they're consuming the content more and more. In both areas, what we're really doing is promoting not just our content, but what we call subscriber exclusive or subscriber only benefits. And there are some key ones. If you're a subscriber, I would definitely encourage you to check them out. One is a visual library, which has over 200 slide decks that are fully customizable and royalty-free, and you can use them any way you want. And there's some cartoons in there that are kind of fun. We have the top 50 best-selling articles from Harvard Business Review. These are classics taught in every business school in the world. And then something we launched about a year ago, which was a sort of a new take on digital journalism. It's a long-form digital series of digital articles and programming that we call the Big Idea around a single topic that may include events and different articles and assessments. And what we did with this is we currently offer it free to everyone that comes to the site for the first 30 days, and then we move it behind the subscriber paywall. So only subscribers have access to it. And so we're really focused on promoting those benefits as well as the benefits of 6 issues of the magazine. And we know that print is still super important and is a big, big factor when someone chooses to subscribe to us. In 2017, we started doing social really across 3 different platforms: Facebook, Instagram, which are now together, and LinkedIn. I'll share with you that LinkedIn wasn't all that successful for us, and we were a bit surprised because we thought that was clearly where our audience would be. We actually have the largest group on LinkedIn, so we thought it was a natural fit. The challenge we ran into is our cost per acquisition there was way too high, and we think it's because everyone's going after the audience that we're going after, and so it was tough to compete. So going back to sort of direct mail versus digital, and why do we make that shift? If you see on the left, we're looking at direct mail, domestic and international, and then paid social and search. And clearly, direct mail is above our average just cost per thousand to purchase it. So this includes everything from printing to postage to shipping. Our international costs are about $800 on a CPM basis. Domestic is lower, closer to $350, but still far, far above what we see with paid social and search. And again, this doesn't get into factoring in conversion rates or any of that. This is just what does it cost us to buy our audience across those three platforms. The other challenge with direct mail is frankly scalability. There's only so many times you can stick a mail piece in someone's mailbox in a month, and we found that the outside lists we were buying really weren't driving a lot of value. And then you're stuck with a house list, and again, how many times can you hit them up? So that's why we moved to digital. In terms of talking about what are our costs per thousand or just media costs around the world, they vary quite a bit. And you have sort of this range of red to green, green being the highest, this red being the lowest. The United States and parts of Western Europe are on the higher end, and then you get into more frontier markets, Middle East and India, other parts of Europe that are much lower. And we're really, really hyper focused on watching this because we think it moves around a bit, and it really needs to be managed. And the one thing with paid social is it throws off so much data that it takes more management. The feedback loop is a lot tighter in that case. The other factor in here that we need to talk about and I need to bring up is deliverability and your credit card decline rate. That also figures into the cost for any of targeting within countries. We tend to use a wide variety of different creative. What we have found is what we call lifestyle advertising, where we're placing our magazine on trays or desks, or someone having a cup of coffee, really perform the best for us. And so that's the direction we've moved into. And that was a bit surprising for us, but it works. And there's a woman that works for me, Katie Trio, and you'll see her hand in pretty much all the ads, and fortunately we don't have to pay her a royalty, so that we can keep using it. In terms of particularly engagement, the same thing happens. It's really that lifestyle ads. On the right, you'll see an ad we're running on Instagram. So, we added Instagram kind of fairly late in the process. Our first thought is maybe it's too younger of an audience. It certainly is very easy to buy media on Instagram. It's a checkbox on Facebook, and they'll optimize across both platforms. And we found it's done incredibly well for us. And if you happen to go on Instagram, you'll see ads for IBM and, large Fortune 100 companies that are even in the business-to-business space. So it's definitely gone mainstream, just like Facebook. It does, I think, attract a bit of a younger demo, but that's where they're heading to. You look at other platforms like Snapchat, that's getting a bit out of favor, particularly with millennials. So we see Instagram as really the up-and-coming platform for us, and we've just launched Instagram Stories to promote our ads. The program highlights, it's been great. Again, just in that first year, fiscal year, when we really made this transition to a digital-first strategy, we drove over 5,000 new subscriptions, over 300,000 clicks to our content. Keep in mind that we do not discount our product, and it's premium price. So we're charging $99 domestically for a subscription, $169 in most international markets. India, it's a little less, it's about $105. And we just added the option to subscribe on a monthly basis. And we're getting some interesting results from that. We're finding with email, when we promote it, we're actually driving more annual and monthly subscriptions than if we didn't include monthly in it. In terms of our cost per acquisition, we're really kind of capping off at about a year of the cost of a subscription. So we'd like to keep our CPA somewhere around $100 domestic and around $170 or lower for international. I'm going to dig into by region how we look at it, because as I talked about, the data just flows constantly, and it's really, really important to zero in on this. So on the left, you'll see the conversion rate, and then there's really two charts. One is the click-through rate, and one is the cost per click. And the size of the bubble is just how many impressions we bought, and typically it's how many we can get at a reasonable cost. Clearly, the United States does extremely well. It has a high conversion rate, about an average click-through rate. The challenge here is if you go to the right side of the graph, the cost per click is relatively high. And part of that feeds into that map where we show just on a CPM basis to buy the media, it's expensive. But then you have a cluster of countries that maybe have a lower conversion rate, but the click-through rate's high and the cost per click is low. So we're increasing, like Brazil, Mexico, we're increasingly investing our dollars there. In South Asia and India, we see some interesting dynamics. So India is just a really fascinating market for us. It's huge. Our brand is very well known and revered. As a matter of fact, there are people on the streets of India that are selling the copies of our magazine for Harvard Business Review. So if you go to India, make sure you pick up a copy. But it's like gold over there. And we thought this would be just an incredibly great market because the cost per thousand, the media costs are lower. But what's interesting, if you look at the conversion rates on the low end, again on that left side chart, the click-through rate isn't bad, but certainly not the highest in this geography. But the cost per click is relatively high. And, what's happening there is the CPM's low, but just the cost to be able to get someone to then go to our site's relatively high. Good news is the amount of impressions we can buy are great. We're really looking at how much we want to invest there because, we happen to have some delivery issues in that country, and so that's another factor that figures in where we invest our marketing dollars. And then Western Europe's just a really interesting story. So Western Europe, you'll see the countries are pretty much all over the place. There's a wide range of conversion rates. The click-through rates are generally pretty high, and then when you go to the cost per click, they're generally on the average to lower. So Western Europe's a fairly good market for us, and we know we've done pretty well even when we were doing direct mail, and there are countries that we can buy a lot of impressions. So it's a great market. We're going to continue to invest a lot in there. The biggest challenge that we have coming up for us is something called GDPR. You're probably familiar with it, which is the Privacy Act in the EU. And without people opting in, we can't communicate to them by email or drop a cookie on their browser. This is going to change the whole dynamic of marketing in the EU. It's happening in California, where we're all going to have to think about marketing to people and not just cookies. So it's definitely going to be a challenge for us. But Western Europe is a solid place for us based on this data. I'm gonna talk about briefly a really interesting experiment we've been running in the paid social space. So our belief is really running lean experiments And we fundamentally believe the organizations that can learn the most the fastest will win. And it's really running sort of these micro experiments and getting rapid information that we can pull back, learn, and then adjust. And we began working with a company called Kiwi that works with a whole slew of publishers, and they're involved in using content and distribution and measurement to target paid social ads on your behalf. They use machine learning to create the post header that you see on Facebook, and then they match your content based on the response rate to some of the 10 million micro-segmented audiences that you can buy on Facebook. It negotiates the right price and drives either subscriptions or drives certainly clicks and views on content. And we've had really tremendous results. So we're using it for two areas. One is to drive subscriptions. The other that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about, which is getting the right audience to content that we can then retarget. So it becomes a retargeting pool for us. We see great results from that. But just from a subscription business, we've driven in a relatively short time, right, couple of months, 600 subscriptions at about a $50 CPA, which is fantastic. What's really interesting is the engagement with these ads are off the charts. I mean, we've gotten almost 26,000 total post reactions, and shares and likes are up there, 5,000, 9,000. It's amazing. And we've been able to just pay for people to click on this, again, targeting people who are most likely to subscribe for about 6 cents on a CPC basis. And the click-through rates are really high, 6%. So we're really excited about this and reaching people who would most likely to subscribe that we probably aren't reaching by people coming to the site. And keep in mind, we get about 8 million unique visitors to the site a month. So we're reaching a different audience. In terms of the top stories we're getting, we loaded up the content. It comes up with the Facebook header, the message, and the click-through rates really vary by post, and you can see ranging from 5.7% to almost 14% with different cost per acquisitions, but it's just definitely generating some strong results. And then, this is a great example how you have exactly the same piece of creative and the headline of the article, but just simply changing the post message drives a significantly higher click-through rate from 5.7% to 9.6%. And it drops your cost per click. And what's great is, they come up with all the varieties, and then, we approve it, and it goes out there, and it's this whole idea of lean experimentation. So we're really super excited about this as an adjunct to our entire paid social efforts. And I guess now happy to take any questions you guys have.
Jeff, I see you have one question. Can you see that question?
Will this deck be available?
No, it's about your rate base and how many times a year do you send out direct mail? I think you addressed that in the beginning, but it probably bears repeating what your strategy around direct mail is now, right?
Yeah, actually, we don't send a single direct mail piece out in terms of subscriber acquisition. Today, we were doing 4 campaigns a year a couple of years ago. Our rate base is, I want to say, 210,000, and our circulation is about 308,000, so it's the highest it's ever been. And we've seen that go up considerably since we've done digital marketing and paid social. So we're not doing any direct mail right now, but we were doing 4 a year. And our quantities were, 800,000 on average per campaign. There was one campaign, I think we did about 400,000 pieces. Again, we used primarily a house list, but we sell our lists, and so we also bought our lists, and we just found those response rates just diving. And so then you're left with your house list, and we saw those response rates go down, but there's only so many times you can keep hitting up your house list. And that's why we really had to relook at this model. And I think fundamentally it's very important to be marketing where your customers are at, and they're clearly on paid social and digital. Again, even though key value of their subscriptions print, so the two don't necessarily need to match. How have your issue video, preview issues gone over? Yeah, so we started doing, actually when I first started a couple years ago, is doing a video, literally it's like unboxing the iPhone. We just opened up the issue that's coming up to some really cool music and zoomed in and out, and it was really interactive. And it's been fabulous. I mean, we get 8,000, 10,000, 15,000 views to some of these videos. And again, you think about it from a scientific perspective, it's literally just the magazine zooming in and out, turning the pages. But then, of course, people spend, millions of views just watching people unbox an iPhone. So we make sure our subscribers have access to that. And again, we typically publish that before the issue comes out, so you can get excited about it and adds a bit of flair to it. Do you see the concept template getting stale? Do you only do it for certain issues? No, so that's a great question. So what we do is we change up the music, and we actually change up the animation so it doesn't quite look the same, and because obviously each issue is different, we haven't really seen it getting stale. Again, we're only publishing 6 times a year, so it's not like we're coming out every week. So every 2 months we're launching a new one. So we have not seen that getting stale. We do it all in-house, so there's no extra creative costs. And we don't, we've tried some experiments where we bought ads with this on YouTube, but generally we post it to our channel, and it gets some great reactions to it. I think I covered all the questions.
I see another one here, Jeff, that may not be visible to you, but it's asking you to talk a little bit more about monthly subscriptions and that model, and whether it's being targeted to a specific audience. And do you see that as an effort that you'll expand?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, I came from the cable business and entertainment, where that's how people were buying HBO and everything on a monthly basis. And it's a little weird here because we publish 6 times a year, but so much of our value is in our digital content and our subscriber exclusives that I wanted to give that perspective, bring monthly here to try. And what we're finding is really a great response to it. We did a conjoint study not too long ago. We found monthly was really attractive to people. And so we're going to expand it. We're probably going to look at doing some targeting with it. Maybe people that had an annual subscription and then canceled or expired, to go back out to them. Certain audiences, certain geographies, it might make sense. Again, today we charge almost $170 for a subscription internationally. With this, you can pay $17 a month and get the print magazine and all the benefits. The other thing, it's interesting enough, and I have a couple of friends of mine who love the idea of monthly. They signed up, and I said, well, I've been talking about Harvard Business Review for 2 years. Why haven't you subscribed? And they said, because I don't need a receipt for my company if it's under $25. So here you can buy domestically $10 a month. You just submit it. It's simple. You don't need to worry about a receipt. So it seems to be an interesting value, and I think we're going to be able to attract an audience maybe that we haven't been able to attract before. But it's still early. But like I said, we tested just on email where we're focused on monthly. But when you click through, you go to an order page that presents you both annual and monthly. We actually saw more people taking annual than when we presented in email only an annual option, and we got these incremental orders for monthly. And I think the idea of monthly at a low price point got people to click, And then it becomes a choice, like behavioral economics. It becomes a choice, not whether or not you want to buy a subscription, but at which term.
Interesting. So it didn't cannibalize, which is what I think some people are afraid of in testing that option. Thank you, Jeff. And that it's good stuff. And as you said, these are not incremental changes. These are really dramatic and different ways to look at what has been a pretty traditional area of magazine media business. So we appreciate you, and I appreciate all three of our presenters for forging new ground and being as innovative as you have been. We are going to do a quick lightning round, and I'm going to ask each of you what is next up, either in terms of challenges or projects. We're going to take the opportunity for the Brain Trust on the phone. And Krista, if it's okay, I'll start with you and ask you what's next for Nat Geo from an audience development standpoint, either from a goal or from a project standpoint.
Yeah, I think continuing on the idea of moving from a monologue to a dialogue is really something that we want to further develop. So I think there's two things that we're focusing on. Is one, to continue to build Chasing Genius and thinking about what is the next challenge to take that community further, but also what other types of communities can we build. So we're exploring how do we build communities on Facebook with closed communities where the amplification for the content and the engagement can happen outside of the community, but then we're inviting people in to the community to then have a dialogue with each other. And so one example of that we're exploring is the new community that we just started called Women of Impact, which I would encourage you to check out and request to join. But sort of learning from that and trying to do a more community development on Facebook and other social platforms, I would say is where we're taking a lot of our social conversations and engagements in our audience.
Thank you. And we'll check that out. I encourage all of our attendees to do so as well. Brad and Maggie, can I ask you what's next?
Sure. Well, one of the things, one piece of the expanding our audience pie that we're already doing is translating one article a month into Spanish. And then we make that available online, tweet it out. It's getting a lot of good responses. And so our next challenge with Your Land is translating the issue into Spanish because Spanish is longer than English. There will have to be a mild redesign of the layout, but we hope to make that available pretty soon.
Great, good thinking and appropriate for the time and for the community, and we wish you well. Jeff?
Yeah, I'd say two quick things. One is content marketing at the top of the funnel, really identifying people who are most likely to subscribe and engage in our content, bringing them into the site, having them, continually to consume it, and then promote subscriptions that are targeted to them is going to be really important to us. And then something that's going to affect everyone. I know it's starting in the EU, but it's going to spread, which is privacy regulations. In the EU it's GDPR, which is really going to challenge all of us in terms of how we utilize and the importance of utilizing our first-party data and focused on collecting as much data about our audience as possible that we own. Ultimately, I think the people that win will be the people that have the most data.
Okay, good thinking, and we certainly concur that that's a big issue for our industry moving forward. I'd like to thank you again for participating and thank our audience for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at noon, where our topic will be on revenue and leadership strategies. We've kicked off our series with a very successful webinar, and I wish you all a great afternoon. And again, to our presenters, bravo for the work that you're doing and for participating today. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank
you.
Thank you.